Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the Red Rabbit Hole. You found us again, deep, dark, underground, and here again with Jane Isaacs, author of Hush Little Baby, which is what we were talking about this week. Nikki, are you still here?
I am, unfortunately. I never went anywhere. The whole week spent here
You want to get
chilling,
out? You want
thinking about what I can encase in concrete.
But it'll be preserved.
Like my latest manuscript.
The moisture won't get to it.
It will never see the light of day. Damn it.
So, Jade, are you still here with us down the Red Rabbit Hole?
I'm still here. Yes, I'm still here. Thank you.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us again. And we left our listeners on a little bit of a cliffhanger when you were going to talk about the experiment that you did as part of your research for Hush Little Baby. Could you tell us a little bit more about what it was that you did?
Yeah, certainly. So just to recap, I have a baby that's been encased in concrete for 15 years before it's discovered in the book. But I struggled to find anybody that could help me tell me what my baby would look like and how things would unfold when it was discovered. I did all my research online. I couldn't find a physical person to verify it, and I was getting quite hot under the collar because I was about halfway through the book at this stage, thinking, well, what if it's wrong? What if my research isn't true? So I decided to do my own experiment. Don't worry, I didn't kill anybody as such. And my daughter's a big foodie. She's just finished studying food science at university, and she cooks loads when she's home. So I walked into my kitchen one Sunday lunchtime, and there was a pork shoulder on the side, and I'm like, ooh, pork is the most similar to human flesh. And I'm thinking, if I bury that in a bucket of concrete in my garden and leave it there for more than 6 months, because the average body, depending on conditions, breaks down within about 6 months, at least I can know if my research plays out, which was the most important thing to me at that stage. So, much to the absolute horror of my daughter, and with the help of my husband, I buried this pork shoulder in my garden in a bucket of concrete, put a pot plant on top of it. I knew it was sealed because my dogs weren't interested in it and there were no flies nearby, and I left it there. And if you can rewind your mind back to the first Maybank holiday before COVID, so we're looking at 2019 here. And I was in edits for the book, so we were getting quite late, really. And I'm eyeing up this piece. We're sitting in the garden. It's on the Sunday, and it's a really hot weekend. And we're sitting in the garden, my husband and I, drinking a cup of tea. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm eyeing up this concrete, thinking I can break into that now. It's been about 7 or 8 months. At least I can see that my research plays out. So my husband gets a sledgehammer, and we crack it open. And for the first 10 seconds, we are transfixed. It looked exactly the same as when it went in there. The meat was still pink. The flesh was still white. It was amazing for the first 10 seconds. What I didn't prepare myself for, and what I know now, is as soon as oxygen hits the piece of meat, it goes into rapid degeneration. And the smell is putrid. Only problem was, my neighbours are having barbecues with their friends and families in the surrounding garden.
Oh,
So
no.
we're in an absolute flat panic as to how to get rid of the smell. So my husband is trying to burn it off the concrete and dispose of that. And I'm thinking, what do I do with this pork shoulder? Because, I can't put it in the bin. It smells too rank.
It's not going to be all right for Sunday dinner now, is it?
No. So I wrap it into carrier bags and I put it in the freezer because frozen meat doesn't smell, right? So we do all of this and we come in and shower, and I think I can still smell that pork, but I thought the smell was in my nose. So I will go to bed, wake up on bank holiday Monday morning. We've got friends coming for brunch. Go downstairs and I can definitely smell that pork shoulder. Open the freezer and whoosh, it comes out to meet me. So half an hour before our friends are due to arrive for brunch, my husband is driving out of the village with a carrier bag outside the car because he won't have it in the car because it smells too bad. And he drove up to the old Harrington World War II airfield in Northamptonshire. It's about 10-15 minutes from us, and buried it there. And my neighbours still joke that the orchids don't grow at the Harrington airfield anymore because the pig shoulder has killed them
Oh
all.
no.
But I had to empty my freezer of everything that was in there in case the smell had permeated it.
Well, I was going to say, did your freezer survive?
Well, my freezer survived, the
Oh my
food all
God.
went, and we had to have a takeaway brunch in the garden that day.
That's 2 dinners. That's 2 Sunday dinners that you ruined there, Jane, isn't it? You stole
Yeah,
the pork
absolutely.
shoulder and you had to have jam sandwiches, and then the throwaway dinner.
Absolutely, but I tell you what, the smell has stayed with me. I mean, I would recognise that smell anywhere. It is so unique and it's so strong and rank. So that was a really big part of that discovery for me, that smell, because I just knew what it was going to be like, and it was also the fact that it's got to be forensically, it's got to be examined slightly differently because it's a block of concrete that's discovered. Then they had to, in my book, they have to get the fire service in to lift the concrete because the police don't have tools to do that. It's too big. And they had to convert a police garage and have it environmentally sterilised to create a sterile environment in which to examine it, because you can't put it in a normal pathology lab because it's too unwieldy. So it's things like that again, another huge rabbit hole of how to get it out from the site. And also it takes a while, and they're trying to create the chilled condition so it doesn't degenerate too quickly, but they're having to take photographs to send them to the investigative team, by the hour really, because the more that you discover and the quicker you discover it, the quicker you can get through to finding out who it belongs to and who's responsible.
And was it literally minutes, seconds that you were looking at that shoulder of pork once you'd got it out of that concrete that it
Yeah,
started to change?
I was thinking that was it like some sort of time lapse
Did
thing?
it
You know, like
literally happen in front of your eyes?
yeah.
Well, we both sort of stare. It was one of those things like out of a cartoon, when you both stare at something and you're like, "Wow!" and then all of a sudden, "Oh my goodness!" because it was putrid. Yeah, it was really funny. When we think about it afterwards, we laugh our heads off. At the time, we were panicking like mad because bank holiday weekend and all our neighbours having barbecues with their friends and family, and we've just created this awful odour
And
everywhere.
also the image of your husband speeding out of the village holding this black bag out the window in my mind, feeling slightly criminal himself that he's going to dispose of this.
Absolutely, yeah. Oh, crazy, absolutely crazy.
But I think worth it, because those moments in Hush Little Baby really stand out for me. When the way you described then being hit by that wall of smell, I could read that description in the book as well. I remember that's how I visualized it when I
Yeah, I mean, it's literally 1 or 2 lines, isn't it? That huge experiment for 1 or 2 lines, but for me, it was worth it because at least I was completely confident that that's how it was going to smell, and that's how it was going to look. So, and I did actually. I think we were improving with the book when I actually found somebody, a former crime scene manager, who has done experiments on bodies buried in concrete, and she was able to send me photographs of what my body would look like. And she was absolutely brilliant. I mean, it was really, I don't know how I found her in the end, but it was an amazing find. So I could put a quick line in at the last minute. But also, she was really interested in my experiment because hasn't been a huge amount of research done on this area. So she wanted me to send me her photos, my photos, which I did, but they were only snapshots. They weren't anything good. So I emailed these across to her, and about 2 minutes later, I got a one-word email saying "lovely" with an exclamation mark. And then about 10 minutes later, I got another email saying, "I'm sorry, I just get so excited about this."
Oh my goodness. Oh, and you can imagine that's her
Oh,
career. Is that what she kind of dedicated herself to, researching that?
Well, yeah, I did send her a basket of flowers to say thank you because she was amazing actually with their help. But it just reinforced everything that I kind of learned. But I just really needed that. But the experiment, as I say, I would never have been able to describe those odors without doing that because it's such a unique smell. It's just yeah,
I kind of,
horrendous.
I can see why they're just snapshots. Like, imagine you taking these pictures as quickly as you
From as
possibly could.
far away as possible. Zoom in.
Disposable camera, yeah.
But even our clothes smell. It was just odd. It was a really weird
I can
situation.
see why we need these kind of the lady you were talking to, these people in the forensics, because it's horrible to kind of think about bodies, and it's horrible to think about corpses and things that have happened to them, but the truth has to come out, that if something
Yeah,
untoward
yeah,
happened
yeah.
to a victim, these are the kind of people that will roll up their sleeves and kind of get in there. I know that in the States they have like body farms, so they can experiment with kind of different muds and different ways of people, how, like fire and things, so they can work out timings and work out like times of death. So was that kind of similar, Jane? Because I mean, I don't think we have body farms in this country, or do we?
No, no, not as far as I'm aware, but we do have entomologists and all that kind of thing, which most people don't really know about. People that look at the insects around a body to work out how long it's been there and that kind of thing. So we do have that, and we have the forensic archaeologists and all that kind of thing. So yeah, we do things in a slightly different way, but we all of this. I mean, anything like this, people, scientists write papers on, and it's used, throughout the world, really. Yeah, it's kind of a bank of stuff I think that the police and the forensic people work from. But if you can find somebody, I mean, I really wanted somebody that's done some work in that area. That was my problem of finding somebody. But if you can, at least you get an accurate description of what it's going to look like, which was so important for me because I just really needed my readers to know that.
Can't imagine how you would find your way into that career. I'm trying to think, what's the path? Like, nobody mentioned that to me at school.
I know.
Nobody said this is an
Well, she was.
option for you.
I think it's something that's born into someone. It's that child on the playground staring at their nosebleed rather than mopping it up.
Well, she started off as a crime scene manager. She works for one of the universities now. So I suppose she's probably had a case of a body buried in concrete, and then that's taken her into the research of it, and then she's done her own research on it. So then, because the first research that they did on it was on piglets, I think, buried in concrete, and I don't know whether that was enforced or not. I don't know much about it, but yeah, very, very odd, very odd.
And I suppose things change in terms of what they can and can't do, because the case of Lara, when did you say she was discovered, Jane, in 2002?
2002, yeah. So even DNA was much slower in those days. I mean, the good thing, there's not really anything good about a body buried in concrete, but the one thing with a body buried in concrete is that they usually have a soft tissue because they haven't broken down and they have been preserved, which means that the DNA process of identifying them is much quicker. You can do it within a few days, and sometimes even quicker than that, if it's fast tracked. But with a body that's like a body that's been buried for years and it's discovered, you've only got bones to work on, and that process of getting DNA from bones takes an awful lot longer, so that slows the investigation down quite considerably.
Wow. So that meant things could move, because things do move fast in the book as well, don't they? Yeah.
Yeah, which you need that in a thriller, don't you? So that's really important. Yeah, so I mean, it's little bits like that just, that literally you go off on a tangent or something like that, and you can be gone for days then looking at that.
Down the rabbit hole.
Down the rabbit hole again. Yeah, absolutely.
That was how because your book is the case that's in your book, although it has the same kind of victim in the same position, it's very different to the real case, isn't it?
Oh, completely different to the real case. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I wanted it to be completely different to the real case. I mean, sadly, the real case that it's based on from 2002, the poor girl was she was identified, but they never actually found out who was responsible for her death because her parents had died, and so that was really, really, really sad. But obviously, for a novel, it needs to be a story, and it needs a lot of meat on the bones. So I have a mother who gave birth to twins, and one of them was died at birth. So she only had one baby in the end, but she had postnatal depression, and the child was actually kidnapped from outside a shop in the pram. So there was a big question mark as to whether she was she's one of the suspects in the book, if you like, because did the baby actually make it there, or did she take an empty pram? There's all these sorts of things hanging over it. We also have a situation where um, she's divorced from her husband because of the trauma of what happened when she lost her baby and everything else. But she ends up marrying his best friend. So does that come into force? So there's so many different suspects in the story, and the press turned against her for a while because she couldn't cope with the press after her child was kidnapped, because people people sort of victimized her, if you like, because she'd left her child in a pram outside the shop. And she's very easily identifiable. She has a Malin streak, which makes her very easily identifiable in the press. So there were lots. I was building a story, and that's my story really. I've kind of built that around that little concept, but making it about the family, and having it as part of the Family Liaison Officer series was much better for me, because usually when you have a lead detective, they're obviously going out and visiting everybody. But when you write through the eyes of a family liaison officer, it is a detective role, but they spend a lot of time with the family. It's a detective constable usually, and they're there to update the family on the investigation and support them. But what most people don't know is they're also there to secretly watch the family, because statistics say that most people are killed by somebody close to them, somebody they know. So they're looking for like anything that might be said that's untoward, anybody that might act a little bit strangely. And you can imagine all those family secrets coming out. This kind of scenario was, for me, one of the perfect scenarios to put in that position, with a family liaison officer, because it's very sort of domestic based, if you like.
And what's the difference between sort of writing with a protagonist as a flow officer and compared to like the police detectives that you have in your other books? Is it the same then in your eyes?
The lead
Yeah.
detective. No, it's quite different. So the lead detectives, you're looking at somebody that is overseeing the whole investigation. So they get to know about everything that happens as soon as it happens. Some of the some things are released further down the investigative team, some things aren't. So they're kind of pulling all the strings at the very top. Whereas when you're a liaison officer, you're quite central to the investigation, because you are spending so much time with the family. So you're feeding into the investigation quite a lot. But it's more sort of a detective constable role. So it is a little bit of a step back, if you like, but a more hands-on approach. It's much more domestic. You're very, very close to the family. Whereas as a DCI or a DI, you might interview the family like once or twice or whatever during the book. You'll be updating them on the investigation, but you won't be spending so much time with them. And that's what I found really interesting, because you could sort of really nail in on that kind of all those family secrets and things.
Yeah, the case that you were talking about with the mum and that, it reminded me of the whole is it Crichton or Creighton? The dingoes ate my baby.
Oh yes, yeah, in
Yeah, with the
Australia,
mum
yeah,
that they'd
yeah,
gone
yeah.
camping and she claimed that dingoes pulled away her baby. And they convicted her, didn't they? And they put her in prison. And then it wasn't until recently they actually discovered the clothes of the baby in a dingo den.
Yeah, it was overturned. Her conviction was overturned, I think, wasn't it? Yeah, yeah. I mean, I suppose in a similar way, because the original case that sparked my idea, um, her sister and her sister's husband were arrested for it.
Oh.
I think we covered that in the last
Mm.
podcast, because they shared the same DNA, so they were questioned and arrested and questioned for several days before they were released without charge. But that must have been horrendous.
It is, especially if it wasn't, oh, well, it depends how old they were at the time. I mean, if there's no way of aging when this baby went into the concrete.
Well, that's it. Yeah, yeah. It depends how. sophisticated forensics were, which were clearly not as sophisticated as they are
And I
now.
think both the parents had died in the 80s, so they obviously lost their parents at a relatively young age as well. So I suppose there's that, like you were talking about in your book, Jane, that delicacy that's required around talking to the family, like you say about the mother of the twins in your book. She has had a really difficult experience first time round, so then when there's somebody else who's got to come and knock on the door and talk to her again, it has to be somebody who can have that balance. But
That
yeah.
empathy, yeah, definitely. Because it has to be done very, very sensitively. This is a woman that she gave birth to twins. She lost one at birth, and then she loses another one. Another one's kidnapped. Yeah, I mean, it's a horrendous situation to go through. It's absolutely awful. And even years later, to deal with that is pretty horrible. And then to have it all brought back to the fore again.
How did you do your research into creating your flow officer?
So I spent an afternoon with a family liaison officer in Northamptonshire Police. I mean, in the office, not out and about, obviously. And he was brilliant. He's retired now, but he was able to tell me all about sort of. I mean, obviously not facts about cases, but what they do, how much time they spend with the family. And what I did find interesting was that there's several the cases that he's had, the families that he still was friends with, and he still met up with them from time to time because they form quite a relationship with them because they're spending quite a lot of time with them. I mean, the Hush Little Baby takes place over a very short time, I think it's only a week or two. But sometimes they're supporting these families for several weeks and into months. And you can get very close to people, and it's a very, very vulnerable time for them. Yeah, really valuable role, actually, really valuable.
How did you find out much about the training?
They're already trained as detectives, and most of them have already operated as detectives, and then they go on specific specialised training courses to become a family liaison officer. It's quite a specialised role, and I think it's quite a demanding role as well. There's quite a lot of responsibility attached to it.
So your flow officer, Beth, this is Hush Little Baby's the third book in the series.
Yes, yeah. So there's two novels before this one.
And you had, when I read it, there was two plots really, wasn't there, that were going on. There was the main plot with the baby, but you had this secondary plot that runs through all the books. So just as a kind of, with my writer hat on, how easy was it to kind of intertwine the two plots in that way?
Well, it was a challenge. I mean, I knew that, and this plot comes through from the second novel, but I also wanted people to be able to read the story as a standalone. You don't have to read the books in order. So I needed to put enough backstory in there, but at the same time, as we're going through the novel, I needed for it to appear fresh. And interesting. So I did find it quite a challenge, I've got to say. It all comes together at the end. I can't really say too much about it because I'll give too much away. It all comes together at the end, but it was quite challenging to run both the plot lines together, if you like, and to tidy it up at the end. It was quite difficult.
And what about the sort of we touched on it before about the kind of the dark matter, I guess, of having children as victims. I know that when I was writing my first book, Little Bones, I was trying to be as sensitive as possible regarding my kind of child killer character. Did you find that it was quite a hard kind of subject matter to write about? I mean, obviously you didn't want to jump down that particular rabbit hole too often, but did that affect you as a writer?
Definitely, definitely. I mean, I spent quite a bit of time with a friend of a friend who's a midwife, and we talked about how women feel when they lose a baby, and what happens, when they lose a baby, because obviously Marie, my character, had lost one of the twins, and how the hospital are and how they deal with all that kind of things. But also later on, obviously, when the child's kidnapped as well. And I just think it has to be done really, really sensitively. We can't deny that very sadly and very occasionally, and it is very occasional, this does happen. And I think that fiction should reflect true life in that respect, although it is fiction. We have to remember that. And I just think you need to do it very, very sensitively. Um, to be able to get it across. Because I think when you're dealing with children, it's so difficult because it's always the wrong way around, isn't it? Whereas as parents, children should always go before us. We should never lose children, and that's something never to be lost sight of. I think the trauma that's involved in that.
Yeah, and as writers, we're told not, you can kill as many people as you like, and even as many kids as you like in a book, but you should never kill animals.
Oh my goodness, that's the worst thing you should ever do. Honestly, one of my novels. I have a dog that ends up being injured, but I deliberately didn't kill the dog because I've got crime writing friends that have had hate mail because they've killed a dog in their novel and things like that. It just seems that people just cannot accept that pets, anything happening to pets is just dreadful. So you have to really be careful of that one, I think. It's astonishing, really, isn't it?
I worry about animals in books. When I'm reading a thriller, yeah. When I was reading The Brother, I remember I was thinking about her dog. When her brother came with the dog, I was like, no, oh no, is he going to be okay? But I'm glad now that I've got an insight into a writer's psyche.
Well, you can actually thank Jane for that scene because that wasn't how it was meant to go in my head. It wasn't until I spoke to Jane about it on a summer afternoon at the pub, and I was just telling you about what I was doing, and you were like, no!
Don't do that!
Never!
It's a complete no.
You saved me from what would have been quite devastating. I would have turned John Wick on that one.
Trauma you'd never recovered from.
I would have been like the puppy scene in John Wick.
That was harsh. That was harsh. That John Wick thing was very harsh.
Yeah. It was. Yeah. So, Jane, I was going to ask, you really go, you've been telling us today about how deep you go into your research and how far down the rabbit hole you go.
Yes.
So how do you get out?
Well, it is difficult to claw your way out, I've got to say. I mean, I do get carried away with it, and I can be carried away with it for days, weeks, months sometimes. I'm working on other aspects and I'm still carried, and there's things that aren't clarified and it can take ages to be clarified. So, yeah, and some things never even get into the book, or they get into the book and they're edited out. So, but yeah, it is, but I do love it. I absolutely love it. I just think that you meet so many interesting people and you get so many interesting stories, to hear so many interesting stories you'd never know about otherwise. So to me, I think it's the best part of writing a book. The rabbit hole is the best part of writing a book.
Fantastic. And it's a gift for the reader as well, because there were so many things in Hush Little Baby that I never knew this. I never knew about bones versus soft tissue. I never knew about some of those other elements about how far underground the concrete would need to be in the field and things like that, or having to create that specialist space. So thank you so much for braving the rabbit hole to bring those elements
my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, guys.
That's all right. I don't think your neighbours would say the same though after that walk exposure that you did.
I actually found the whole thing really amusing. Luckily I have very good neighbours, and they did find the whole thing really amusing. It could have been very awkward, couldn't it?
You admitted it. You should have gone, oh, what was that?
I can hardly deny it. The smell was putrid.
Where's that coming from?
I hope you didn't put your daughter off cooking.
No, she was very, she was very annoyed with me for a very long time there because I'd used her pork shoulder.
So it was pizza for tea that night.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, she'll bring around every time she brings something around. She goes, "No, we only do vegetarian dishes at my mum's."
Well, let's put it this way: she doesn't tend to leave it out what she's cooking anymore.
There's not many kids. There's not many kids that say, "I can't leave it on the counter because my mum will encase it in concrete."
Absolutely. There we are.
So, Jane, what sort of rabbit holes are you jumping down at the moment? Because it sounds like you're a professional at this. I mean, you've got like digging equipment and you're spelunking down them.
Well, yeah. So, I'm possibly the next book, maybe set in the Cotswolds. So I've been to the Cotswolds and had a look around there, a little look around, and looked at settings and things, and possibly something to do with floristry, because I've actually been and done a year at college studying floristry. So, yeah, watch this space. It's going to be something in that area, I think so.
That's dedication. That's dedication. You know what?
Yeah,
I think my next book is going to be set in the Bahamas.
Perfect. Research on expenses.
Over 5
Yeah.
years as well, like a really long.
Yeah.
You need to
Yeah,
see how
definitely.
things
I've got to see the
change.
seasons. I've got to see. I've got to build a house, see how that kind of settles in. Yeah, definitely. And then I've got to cruise around the world, maybe. Then I'll get around to writing it.
Like, we laugh about that, but I have got a friend that set she set a novel on a cruise ship, so I'm sure she must have gone on a cruise to have researched that one.
Yeah, the details, that the devil is definitely in the details in these kind of books, because you can't, with the kind of readers that we have in this audience, the crime and thriller readers, you can't pull wool over their eyes. You can't treat them with kid gloves. They know stuff and they've read a lot of books.
Absolutely, and I think that's the most important thing, really. And also, you don't really want to that we want to tell a damn good yarn, basically, and we want it to be nice and believable, really believable. And I think the research is important to be able to create that and to establish that, don't you?
Yeah, and that Lara case, as sad and awful as it was, I think with the amount of work that you put into it, and I know it wasn't, you didn't represent in the book identical or anything like that, and you wouldn't want to, but what you did there was you honored her. You honored her as a victim. You took the time to make sure that all the details were correct. And I just find it so sad that we'll probably never know really what happened to that little baby.
No, it's astonishing in this day and age with DNA as sophisticated as it is now that we don't know. But it's that luckily cases like that are becoming more and more rare because forensics are so advanced now that usually once they're discovered, we can generally find out what's happened and find the person responsible. Thankfully.
I hope so. I hope so, because those kind of cases, like I said, they really kind of stick to you, don't they? And they're dark, and
Definitely.
So I think we're going to wrap up now. So thank you, Jane. Thank you so much for being with us and braving the red rabbit hole.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great fun.
We'll let you out. Okay.
Look, she's burrowed further than us, Lisa.
She has, actually. Maybe she could show us the way out.
I don't think she wants to.
Leave us down here.
Jane seems really dedicated, don't you, Jane? You're dedicated to research, to jumping down rabbit holes.
Yes, I think I'll be in the rabbit hole forever, to be honest.
So you're going to have to come back, especially if
Yes.
you're doing your floristry in your Cotswolds. I really want to find out what's going on there, and what kind of book you're going to be writing and presenting to the world.
Well, I will certainly let you know.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Jane. Yeah, it's been a real pleasure and great learning. I've learned so much from just researching this podcast and reading your books. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me.
So where can we find your books, Jane, if someone wants to read Hush Little Baby and the rest of your series?
Oh, pretty much everywhere. I mean, everything's on Amazon these days, so they're all on there. They're in the libraries. I think you can order them from the bookshops if they're not on the shelf. So pretty much anywhere, really. But I'm on Audible as well. Yes, all on Audible. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. So pretty much most places, really.
And we'll pop some links in the show notes, as well as links to the Lara case and to the other cases that we talked about. Unfortunately, Jane, do you still have the pictures of the pork?
No, I don't. Oh gosh, well, I say I don't. I don't think I do. I mean, we're going back because it was 2018, 2019. So I'm not sure where I'd find them now. But
we do have a
yeah.
live interview with one of your neighbours.
Yeah, lined up.
Found it in deep dark depths of TikTok somewhere. No,
the smell that ruined our barbecue. The last barbecue before lockdowns.
Yes.
Excellent.
Well, thank you guys for listening in. I hope you enjoyed it and found it educational.
Thanks everyone for joining us here once again, and we look forward to seeing you next time back down the red rabbit hole.
And do remember to leave a review and give us a thumbs up on whatever platform you're listening on. We are a new podcast and we appreciate every listener.
Yes, we do.
Bye guys.
Bye-bye.